sponsor of Fearless Women.
Amy here, absolutely. Yes, we are ethically, you're right.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for supporting the show. We really appreciate it.
All right. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for being here with me today. It's been a while since I've been back on the Fearless show, and I'm so excited to have you. When I thought about when I was gonna come back and what I wanted to do, I was like, you know what? March is Women's History Month. March 8th is International Women's Day. I have to have Stephanie on. Like, you have been someone that I met a while ago, and I've been watching and I've been feeling empowered by. And, I wanted everyone to hear from you. I wanted my audience to hear from you. I wanted you to share your story and, everything you've been through, all of your great accomplishments. So I'm so happy to have you here today. And everyone, this is Sue Fearless, and I'm the founder of Fearless Women and also the Fearless Show. And I'm so happy to be here. So Stephanie, let everyone know who you are. And I want you to start off talking about your PR experience and all of that good stuff.
Wow. Well, first, Sue, happy International Women's Day to you.
Yes.
Happy Women's History Month to all of us. And welcome back, The Fearless Show. I am more than humble and honored to be one of your very first guests back with your new launch. So again, thank you so much for having me. Wow, my very beginning. So I'll tell you something. Before I got into PR, which I want to bring this up because it's going to tie into later on in our conversation and make a little bit of sense for where I am now. But I actually started off after college doing speech therapy in the Board of Education. And so I did that for about 6.5 years. I was a speech therapist. I was a second grade teacher. My degree was in speech with a concentration in public communication. So I was always interested in public relations and was trying to figure out how I was going to make that transition. Had the opportunity, one of my very close friends, his friend was actually a hip hop artist that was in transition, going from being on a major label to an independent label, was shifting gears, new manager, new publicist, and decided to give me an opportunity. And that was back in like the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. And that was the launch of Carnegie Public Relations LLC, as most people know, Carnegie PR. And that was my start of spending a little over 13 years in the music and entertainment industry. I've worked with a lot of artists, from independent artists to mainstream artists. A lot, of course, who you may know, I've worked with Wyclef Jean. I've worked with Little C's Uncle Murder. May know I've worked with G Unit, doing some things with Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo. One of my most special and favorite artists, God bless his soul, Fred the Godson, who passed away last April. Due to the coronavirus. We actually just did an amazing street sign unveiling in his name, in his honor, on his birthday. And so that was my beginnings, and working with DJs. I worked with the Source magazine. So I did a lot of work in music and entertainment, event planning, brand management. Yes. And then something happened. You stop me. You want to stop me? Okay.
Yes. Before we get into that, oh my God, because that's going to be the major component of our conversation, which we've been meaning to have for a while. But I just first want to say congratulations. Congratulations for, running such a successful PR company, Carnegie PR. I love your story because I remember when I was event planning as well. And I was out there, I was networking, and I remember like a few folks approached me like, hey, would you be interested in like running somebody's brands and being their PR person? And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. So I give you the ultimate props for, being in that industry, because it's not easy. It's not an easy industry. Like marketing, PR, it's definitely not easy. So I wanted to ask you a few questions around that.
Absolutely.
Before we get to our next topic. So you did let us know what led you to the journey. And then I wanted to know, did you also do marketing and PR for like entrepreneurs, or was it just artists in the industry?
So when I started out working with just independent artists and then moved to mainstream. What ends up happening when you get really vested in your clients, right, and their brands, for me, I always felt that an audience connected to who a person was, right? So if a person likes you, they like your personality, they like who you are, they're more inclined to support anything that you do. The music that you put out, listen, just be honest, sometimes whether it's good or not, if I like Sue, whatever Sue is doing, if I like her, the authentic her, then I'm going to support just about anything that Sue does. And so for me, I think one thing that stood out about the work that I did in PR was the nature of my relationships with my clients. Like I could represent them and speak for them, and they'd be comfortable and confident in that even when I was not with them. A lot of times people would think that I was a manager for some of my clients because of how involved I was. And so having them get into other things, whether it was charity or whether it was thinking about taking their personal brand further, was something that I was always interested in doing when working in PR with my clients, which eventually, yes, led me to working with some brands. I did some work with 5001 Flavors, which is a very well-known brand from like way, way back, right? When they celebrated their 20-year anniversary, they ended up opening up Harlem Haberdashery, a very well-known boutique in East Harlem. So I did some work with their brand. I started also working with media personalities, so more than just like artists. I also was working with the Source magazine. So yeah, so it ended up extending more than just music. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so awesome. And then the reason why I asked that is because a lot of entrepreneurs need marketing, need PR for their businesses. Is very important, to create the brands, like you said, to create that perfect brand for your business so that you'll be able to attract clients. So I think it's amazing that you've done that. Thank you.
And I want to say this too, because I think sometimes people, so marketing and PR go hand in hand, but they're literally like two different jobs, right? So there'll be a marketing consultant or a marketing director, a marketing person on a team that is also working. It's kind of like interconnected. So you have some PR, public relations specialists that may do marketing, and you may have some that just focus on public relations, brand management, publicity, media, those type of things. But the two are actually two separate roles that are definitely interconnected, and they go hand in hand. If you have PR, you need marketing. If you're getting marketing, there has to be something that you're marketing, and then you're going to have to tell a story, so you're going to need PR, if that makes sense.
And do you feel like it's important to put that team together? And I'm speaking for not so much the entertainment business, but more like the entrepreneurs that are launching their businesses. Do you think that's an important component, or where in their journey do you think they should bring that marketing and PR team into play?
I mean, once an entrepreneur has a product, well, first of all, you can be the product, and stepping into this journey that I'm in, you can be the product, right? So as an entrepreneur, it can be you, because it depends on what you're doing as an entrepreneur. Are you a public speaker? Do you do coaching? So, what do you do? Or you're an entrepreneur that actually has a product. So again, if you're coaching and public speaking and and art, doing things like that, you are the products, right? If you have an actual physical product or something that you're putting out, once you have something to market, you're going to need you're going to need a marketing campaign, because because the marketing is going to determine how you're connecting with your audience. First of all, marketing is going to help you identify, first of all, who is your audience. So from the beginning, you're going to need that, right? The public relations and the publicity and all that's going to come once all that is together. and then it's packaged, and then you have now a campaign to push out. You know what I mean? So yeah, definitely stages. And I think a lot of times people like to skip over. A lot of times what was happening with me also, which is actually how I really got more into adding like brand manager to my title and to my role and what I was doing also in PR, was because I would find that people, for some reason, everybody, you have an idea, and the next thing you know, people are saying, oh my God, you need a publicist. Like, you have to have a publicist. No, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So there were people who would come to me and would say that they were looking for a publicist and didn't even have a brand identity for their brand and what they were pushing out. So it was like, no, you don't need a publicist. You actually need a brand manager to identify, what your brand identity, to help you establish that, whether it's things from like, your logo, if your website, your brand, your message, all of those type of things. And they were wanting to jump, and all of those things weren't even together and ready yet. What are your short-term goals and long-term goals for your brand, right? Again, who is your brand audience? Who are you targeting? All of those type of things. And so we would have to go back and build, and then be ready for a PR push, a PR campaign, and things like that.
Right.
Yeah. So I think people need to really do their due diligence and like understand, like, what does a manager do? What's the role of a manager? Right? What's the role of your marketing consultant or your marketing specialist? What's the role of a publicist? And a publicist, someone who's just doing publicity, a public relations specialist that is more involved, and that's when you talk about, the branding and like the whole thing. Their levels. So I think it's very important to do your due diligence and do your homework and understand what you need, and then build your team accordingly.
Yeah, because I feel like that's the most important thing, and sometimes the most difficult thing, especially when it comes to like social media, is identifying like who your target audience is. I think we need to spend more time figuring that out, so that it can match the content that we're putting out, and we can attract those that target audience for your product, for your business, or whatever. And then also, like, what's your story, right? So who are you? That needs to go into your brand. And then what's your business and your brand? Like you mentioned, truly identifying what that is. So thank you for sharing.
And I always encourage people, again, the authenticity, because I know it's easy to get caught up in, what's happening right now, but we should also pay attention to how quick fads come and go, how social media, and then you have, people who are calling influence, dictate what is and what isn't. That's why I always encourage the authenticity part. Like, brands that are authentic last longer. Look, their shelf life is much longer. We see brands fly on and off the shelf all the time. Authenticity is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, 100%. And then one last question.
Okay.
So can you share what your strengths are as a PR person, as a PR brand? Maybe something that aspiring, PR managers can take.
So I would consider myself a former public relations specialist, because while I will consult, I am no longer a publicist, but I advise and I mentor. So I think the first thing is find your lane and what it is that you're interested in. Is it going to be entertainment? Is it going to be lifestyle? Is it music? Is it sports? Are you interested in nonprofits and corporate businesses? Are you interested in hospitality? There's such a wide range of businesses and industries that need public relations, and then understanding exactly what the role and responsibility of a public relations specialist is, a public relations manager, a publicist, really understand. And then when you find your lane and your niche, don't lower your value. Don't lower your value, because we're in an industry. First of all, it's Women History Month, so let's talk about it. We're women, right? Mm-hmm. So we're in a male dominated industry in entertainment, right? So we're the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the country, but a lot of times, especially in entertainment, like we're still in mostly a male dominated industry. And so hold your value, don't settle, don't negotiate your worth. If you do your due diligence, whether that's you're in school and this is, you know, you have your degree in this, or, you know, you an internship and you've started off at a company where, or you're somebody who wants to go independent and have your own independent label, whatever direction that it is that you want to go, and you're doing your due diligence and you're doing your hard work and you're putting your work in, do not settle and do not negotiate. Because I'll tell you that I did a lot of that. And it affected me in a lot of ways from when we get into this later part of this conversation. I did a lot of that because, you know, in this industry, you want to, I started off as, I was an independent publicist. My company, Carnegie PR, started from zero to what, you know, I grew it to be. So I didn't intern at a record label or work as an assistant to, you know, a higher public relations executive at a company and then venture out to start my own. So every contact that I made, every relationship that I made, I started from, I had to build, you know, up to that. And sometimes when that happens, you find yourself negotiating in certain areas that you may not have negotiated in before, if perhaps you were attached to, let's say, a bigger company, right? So there were times at the beginning, you know, where I did that. And when you start doing that, and people will constantly try you,
Right. Yes.
and want to negotiate with you on your numbers and on your worth. So know your worth and
Yes.
stand on your worth. And we're not negotiating numbers. If anything, they're going up, not down.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing those important details. So I want to now move on and fast forward to, you know, how you came to be today, and starting totality of a woman. You know, I know that this is coming from an experience that you've had, which you were about to get into. So if you want to kind of tell us your story and your journey and what led you to be an advocate for mental health.
Well, after 13 years in the music and entertainment industry and doing a lot of building of other people's brands and other people's careers, which I am grateful for the work and my accolades and my accomplishments and the things that I achieved working in PR. However, there came a point where I wanted to find more purpose out of what I was doing. And that took me through a lot of changes, right? After I said, I left the Department of Education as a speech therapist, right, to become this entrepreneur, right? This successful Black woman in PR, having my own business. And I worked so hard to build that. And then I get to a point where I'm just like, not always feeling appreciated. Again, going through a lot of different things in the, you know, in the industry, not always feeling appreciated, not always feeling valued, working hard. That caused a lot of stress, right? Going through some personal things. And this might be the first time that I've even said this, Sue, because I've always said it was the work, and then I was going through some personal things. So it tied in because I was in a long relationship with someone that was very well known in the music industry, not an artist or rapper or anything like that, but somebody that was very well known in the music industry. And so going through personal changes and the changes that I was going through working as a publicist, a lot of stress was on me, and I ended up battling with depression and anxiety really, really bad. But here's the thing, for about 3 years, I'm still showing up, Stephanie Carnegie of Carnegie PR, who is known to show up and get the job done, supersede expectations, actually, because that's what I stood on. right? Superseding the expectations of my clients, being absolutely result driven. Because in the industry that we're in, at the end of the day, your clients just, they want to see the results, right? They want to know that you're obtaining the results that they want. And so I'm showing up, and my results are just as amazing as they are, but you're in an industry where you can't say that you're feeling stressed. You can't say that you're depressed. You can't say that you had trouble sleeping last night. You can't say that you had trouble getting out of bed this morning to just get dressed to even show up on set, or to show up at the radio station or at the TV station or whatever the things are, because nobody wants to hear that.
Right.
Because unfortunately they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They just want you to get the job done. And so I was showing up, and then I was going home broken, a mess, falling apart, and not talking about it. And then I had some close people in my circle, my tribe, who kind of started paying attention, like, okay, something's not really right here. We're not answering phone calls. We're not socializing, because a large part of that is isolation, especially depression. And so fast forward, after a lot of my own suffering in silence, one of my very close sisters, my cousin, she reached out for support. I started going to therapy. Therapy turned out to be very amazing and healing for me. That's why I'm a strong advocate for therapy. And then I also had to create my own self-care regimen. So I got into meditation. I got into journaling. Journaling was something that I've always been into, but then you go through things and you don't do those things, right? So because you're so caught up. So I got back into journaling, meditation heavy, which was a really big struggle for me, because I felt like the more I tried to calm down and breathe, it was like the more anxiety that I got. But I will tell you, as I sit here now, taking a breath, controlling your breath, and breathing is life-saving. I don't know what I would do even on this journey right now, because I would tell you that what I've learned is that healing is not a destination, it's a journey. It's a journey that we're continuously on. And finding my breath has been a part of saving my life and keeping my mental health together. And I got into exercising, which is still a journey that I always am transparent about. Out of my little self-care trunk, the fitness one is the one that I kind of struggled with the most. But there were things that I had to do daily, and there are things that I have to do daily right now. That same regimen. Yoga is something that I got into. So all of these things collectively, and then having a tribe of support.
Yes. Yeah. I want to jump in real quick. I like that you said healing is a journey, because it is a journey, right? So just like with everything, healing from trauma requires consistency. So I like that you started doing these things again on a consistent basis. And that kind of helped you get out of that dark place, because now you were, instead of focusing on the dark side, on the negativity, on the depression, you were now focusing on more positive things, and you were actually writing things down. You were able to read it out loud to yourself, or whatever your regimen was. Self-care is super important. So I like that you said that. And also like the controlling of your breath, that's so important. I also struggle with meditation. I'm pretty sure you're better at it now. But the reason why I struggle with it is because I am a person who's constantly trying to accomplish many things in one day. So I can sit down, and maybe the longest is like 60 seconds, but after that, I'm already thinking about the next thing that I have to do. Yeah.
It is a practice.
Yes. So I agree that's super important. Thank you for sharing, that story with us. Part of my story also is that I come from a domestic violence situation. So I can definitely relate with you when it came to depression and not answering phone calls, not getting up from my bed. I have two children, sometimes just like kind of like fend for yourself. I'll get up, you know, when I can, when I have the strength to, you know, for so many years, I felt like I didn't have a voice. I felt like I was living a double life. A lot of people didn't know what I was going through. So thank you for sharing that. I can definitely relate. And I just want to say that I'm so proud of you for being so strong, and you know, through therapy and through your self-care regimens that you started doing, we're able to get out of that space. And you know, I commend you for that. I commend you. And I'm so happy that, you know, sometimes the things that we go through, although they're very dark, they lead us to this amazing place. And now you're running Totality, you know, of a Woman, which is
So and we're actually Totality Wellness Inc. now, because as of November, we became a 501c3 nonprofit.
yes.
We did, when we started off, when we launched, and this is our anniversary month. We launched March 25th, so we turned 3 years old this month. And you're right, Sue. When we launched, we were Totality of a Woman, because again, what happened was that when I got on this healing journey, I said, I have to start talking. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this working in the industry, like, because I was on my way out, but I wasn't out. And that was the thing. It was like I was going back and forth for like 3 years and going through this thing. I'm going to be, I'm not, and all of this. So when I decided that I was going to share my story, we launched 3 years ago this month. We launched as Totality of a Woman because our focus was on women, right? Because when I started telling my story, what I found that women in all walks of life were suffering from depression, were suffering from anxiety, women who had attempted to take their own lives, because statistically, women attempt suicide 2 times more than men. Men actually achieve, how ironic is that? Men are twice as successful, but women attempt it twice as much as men. So we try more, but they actually follow through and succeed with ending their own lives. And so when I started sharing these stories, I just found out that so many women were suffering in silence. That so many women were looking for a safe space to go where they could share their stories, where they could be in real sisterhood, non-judgmental, a place of empathy, a place of compassion, but first and foremost, again, a safe space. And so we launched as Totality of a Woman, doing a women empowerment and self-care conference. And so that was our beginnings working with women. And I must say that when we come full circle, when it comes down to mental health, and when you're talking about things like trauma, then you start looking at women. You just said you have 2 children. I have a 24-year-old daughter. So then it had to turn and say, well, how are things affecting the children?
Right.
We need to examine and look at what's happening with the children. So then we started working and doing programming and initiatives with children, and we launched Totality Kids. After that, we say women, children, when we think about our men and all of the things that they go through and they deal with, okay, so we're realizing now that you can't leave anyone out when you're talking about healing, wholeness, being well, mental health. You can't leave anyone out. And we started doing our research and learned over 6 million men a year suffer from depression. And again, the suicide rate. So then we launched Totality Men, and that is how we ended up coming full circle as Totality Wellness Inc., offering healing, support, programs, workshops, resources for the entire community, because we believe Totality Wellness is totality, mind, body, and spirit, intended for all. Healing and wellness is intended for all. And that's how we came full circle.
That's so awesome. Well, congratulations on your anniversary. Yes, that is so awesome. And it definitely is a full circle moment, right? I love how you got to a place in your life when you were like, all right, I've achieved so much with my company. I've done so many amazing things, but what is my purpose, right? What is my purpose? And you used what you went through, as they say, you used your pain to turn it into purpose. And I think that's so amazing. And I thank you so much for you know, caring so much about our communities, and speaking, you know, to our youth, to our men, to our women, and helping us, you know, like you said, create that sisterhood, that brotherhood, that community, to be able to know that we have somebody to lean on, and that we're not the only ones going through these things. I know when you and I had a conversation on the phone, one of the things we talked about was during the pandemic, how so many victims of domestic violence, so many victims of abuse going on with children, and how they were stuck at home with their abusers during quarantine. So tell me a little bit about that. I don't know if you heard of any cases and things like that, but let's talk about mental health centered around being quarantined and especially as a child, being taken away from your friends, not being able to see your friends and interact and engage and things like that.
So let me say this, because I've I've been asked this question a lot, because I've been doing mental health in the youth workshops and support groups for youth and adolescents and for parents since the pandemic. And so when we have this conversation, I always start and say, first and foremost, mental health issues among youth, the suicide rate, which is at crisis numbers as far as Black and Brown communities, were existing and happening way before the pandemic. What the pandemic has done is spotlighted and magnified and heightened issues that were already happening. So since we're on this, I just want to be able to share a few statistics for our mothers, educators, caregivers, community-based organizations, anybody that's interacting with youth that are listening. So before the pandemic, mental health issues were on an extreme rise with youth ages 6 to 17. Suicide is currently the second leading cause of death of Black and Brown youth ages 10 to 14, and the third leading cause of death of Black and Brown adolescents ages 15 through 19, and 1 in 13 high school students have attempted suicide. So there have been a lot of issues going on with our youth before the pandemic. When we think about childhood adversity, when we're talking about, like we said, domestic violence, substance abuse, child abuse, right, neglect, all of these things that are happening in the home that's already causing trauma and toxic stress in our children. Then we think about bullying and the things that are happening within inside of the schools. And then now we get into our communities and look at things like community violence and police brutality and all of the other social unrest and inequities that are happening. Our children have been impacted by these things for a long time, and we have not been paying attention, just being very honest and transparent, because we as mothers and women and the adults, we have things going on like we're talking about right now, right? Whether it's busy lives, whether it's our own trauma that we still haven't navigated through and haven't healed from. But I always say trauma not transformed is trauma transferred, right? So our healing, the healing and the lives of our children and the generations that are to come, they are dependent upon our healing. And so those are the things that was happening before the pandemic. Now you add the pandemic, like I said, and now they're dealing with isolation. Now they're dealing with remote learning, which is heightening and spotlighting the failed education system, because it didn't just start failing a year ago when the pandemic hit. It's been a failed system. And although this is something very unprecedented because it's a global pandemic, it still shows, though, the way they handle things as far as the reopening and the children, that it's a failed system. So now all of these things on top of the things that the children were already experiencing that were not being identified and being dealt with, now you add this, and yeah, the children are having a lot of anxiety. The children are experiencing depression. The children are going through a lot. And what I'm finding is that adolescents, they are asking for spaces now to be able to talk about what they're dealing with and to be able to figure out how they can get some help, whether it's through counseling. Some of them are asking for counseling, whether they're asking for support groups to, you know, and to be able to get tips and strategies. I know because I'm talking to them.
Right.
And they want their parents to hear them.
Yes.
They want their parents to hear them.
Wow.
For the parents that are listening.
Right.
And they know that you're dealing with trauma because they're saying it. They know that you're dealing with things and the family's dealing with things and that it's affecting a lot. And they want you to know that it's affecting them too. And they don't know how to talk to you. And when they do come and talk to you, we have so much going on. We're not really listening.
Right.
And they know. They know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so great that they are now speaking up for themselves. And I want to go back to a question, but I want to ask you something first. You mentioned something really important. You said trauma not transformed is trauma transferred. And I think that that's where we break the cycle, right? Because as adults and as parents, we need to understand that these kids are dependent on us. They're dependent on us in their growth, in their development. So, as you said, if we have traumas that we still haven't dealt with, and, and this is everyone, even unknowingly, you're taking out your trauma on your children, right? Because they're the closest people next to you. Because they always say also, when you're going through trauma, you take it out of the closest people near you. So if you're home with your children, like I mentioned to you, when I was depressed, I'm pretty sure there were moments where I probably lashed out at them for no reason because I was upset and I was aggravated inside. So I think that's super important. And I think it's great that the kids are coming out and now they want to have this space and they want their parents to listen to them, because it wasn't always like that. Before, it was more like there was more embarrassment, shame. They were fearful about sharing what's going on in their home with a counselor, with a mentor. So why do you think that our kids are being so outspoken now and a little bit more in tune with with themselves, with wanting to grow, with wanting to be heard?
You know what? I always tell people that children, they're us, just the smaller versions of us. And so I think my answer to that would be the same way during the pandemic, right? I am not a therapist. I am not a counselor. I'm a mental health advocate. I am trained as a mental health, certified and trained as a mental health first aid, and I am certified in trauma-informed care. So there are people who have reached out to me during the pandemic for referrals, for therapy, because they realized when they had to sit down and be inside and sit with themselves, they realized that there were some things that they were feeling, that they were thinking, that they were experiencing now that they had the time to, right? Same thing for our young adolescents. They're at home now too. They're sitting with themselves. They're noticing, guess what? They're noticing now when everybody's in the house together, how they feel when dad's home or when mom's home, the dynamics of how they're feeling everything. Everything is, there's no space to go and have the outlet of the release, like, sports, right? And all the other different things that they might do, any other extracurricular activities that they did, any clubs that they might have been involved in their school. All of those things are releases. I tell people all the time, even exercise, like I said, that's the journey that I struggle with the most, but that's the one I keep bringing it up because that's the one that I'm pushing myself to be more disciplined in. You know why? Because when I exercise and when I'm done, it's proven what exercise does to the brain. Oh, it's amazing for us physically, and all of that. But what it does for the muscle, what it does for the mind is something incredible. And I feel it immediately after I work out and after I release. So a lot of things that they were able to do, they don't have that. And so now, all your body speaks to you. My day job, I run programs at a women and children's shelter. So I've been essential working this whole pandemic, a whole nother level of anxiety. And I went through a really rough time at the beginning with my own mental health. That's how I even started to sit on the couch, my talk show on live, as a place to express and relief, because I went through a lot. When we were told we had to shut down and I had to still get on the trains and travel from Brooklyn to Harlem when the whole country is being told to stay in. And every other day you're hearing thousands of people are dying outside where I have to go. And this is a whole unprecedented situation we're in. I went through a lot. Fast forward, my time during this pandemic, I oversee programs for the 5 to 17-year-olds in the shelter. But clearly during this time, we've been focusing on supporting with remote learning, supporting, more support for the families. My 5, 6, and 7-year-olds start their morning off with affirmations, some chair yoga, some breathing, and then midday after lunch and stuff like that, we do some fitness when they have to go back to finish off the rest of the day, because they need the same things that we do, because they're feeling things already. First thing in the morning, ask them what's on their minds and watch what starts coming out. I think sometimes we don't even realize, even as parents, the simple how are you, or like what you think, what's on your mind today. You'd be surprised if you ask that question, as simple as it sounds, what your first light bulb is going to go up. They're going to say, hold on, they're asking me, hold on. So they're creating a space to want to know what's on my mind. You'd be surprised what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. I'm a mother of teenagers. So it's funny that you say
How
that,
old
because
are they?
I'm sorry?
How old
My
are
daughter's
they?
15 and my son is 17. So it's been quite a challenging time, because this is my son's last year in high school, and he's been basically remote, and he plays sports and hasn't been able to. So he definitely has been struggling because of that, because that was his outlet. Like, sports was his outlet. Him engaging with his friends was his outlet. He's pretty good. He's a homebody, but he still misses that, interaction and like you said, just releasing. And but it's funny that we're talking about this, because I took a drive with my daughter yesterday, and she's 15, and we actually had this conversation out of nowhere, and she was like, you know what, Mom, I've changed throughout this quarantine time. I've grown a lot. She said, things that I used to care about before don't even really matter anymore. Like, she's like, I miss my friends, I miss going to school, but I also enjoy just being home. She learned how to be with herself and just not engaging in anything that wasn't, positive for her. And I was like, wow, okay. Like, that's amazing, and that made me so proud. But I know that not every child, is seeing it this way, like in a positive way, and they do need that outlet. So I definitely agree that, the circumstances are now causing our children to speak up. That makes total sense. Absolutely. 100%.
And I'm proud of them. I'm so proud of them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what has been your experience dealing with men with mental health issues, women with mental health issues, and youth with mental health issues. If you can just share with us like a few important things that maybe we can also catch and look at, like if we have a family member that's going through mental health issues and things like that. Because sometimes, like you said, because of our daily lives, we just don't notice it and we let it go. Like I work for a center, and not particularly at my center, but at our sister centers, there were a couple students who did commit suicide, and we had a suicide prevention training, because maybe there were signs, and some of the staff didn't see it. So what has been your experience dealing with the different genders and ages?
So wow, I mean, it's like a wide range question.
Yeah.
And there's no, and sometimes for some situations there were no signs, and then sometimes for some situations I've heard parents say, in hindsight, maybe they would have poked a little bit deeper at an answer to a question if a child seems, and this is when I was talking in reference to the suicide. So let's start with the children, right? So there are different age groups, and so trauma and mental health show up in kids differently. But if we want to just do some general things, so first of all, if one thing that we can look up for, if a child is sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, right? And so these type of things too to keep in mind. This is not if the child had a rough night or it was a rough day at school, something happened, like the circumstances. We're talking about like prolonged, like when we need to pay attention to, okay, this might be a red flag, or this is something that now we need to be concerned about. These are things, if you're noticing, it's been a week, it's been 2 weeks, 2 weeks or more, and you're noticing like these patterns. Like I said, not if this is, once in a blue or here and there. When, again, the sleeping patterns, if we're sleeping too much or we're not sleeping enough. Um, Changing in eating habits. Especially for children and adolescents, things like stomach aches and headaches and things like that. And that's why, and before we wrap up, I hope I have an opportunity to mention the bill that I'm working on with Senator Parker. And why? Because exactly what you said, even when you said about the suicide training, that you got, suicide prevention training that you ended up getting, right? Because if you don't know how trauma and mental health issues can affect the child's, first of all, environment affects our biology. So from the brain development to the hormone system and the immune system, all of these type of things. So you may think a child is saying that they just have a stomach ache, but if you're noticing a child is complaining a little bit more than normal about things like headaches and stomach aches, that's how anxiety shows up in the body. That's how toxic stress can show up and cause physical things right in the body. The same way with adults. My stress goes straight to my stomach. Soon as I'm in a stressful situation, my stomach is in knots. It's a mess. My head starts hurting. I know that because your body will talk to you. Irritability, right? Someone who is not someone that's easily, upset or angered, and all of a sudden, like you're noticing a lot. Any little thing has them irritated. And that's in youth, adolescents. That can be seen in the adults as well. Obviously, when we're talking about adolescents and teens now, so we're looking for things like drinking, smoking, that type of stuff, risky behavior, you know what I mean? All of those type of things, especially if this is a child who was not displaying this before, and now you're noticing that. That's more for the adolescent, like the 11 and up, 12 and up, and things like that. For the younger ones, things like bedwetting, like if there's, even in like age 5 to 11, if they've outgrown that, but now we're resorting back to things like when we were a little bit younger, like bedwetting and those type of things. If you have a child that's withdrawn, someone again that like to socialize, we like to play, I like to play with my brothers and sisters, and I like to play with my cousins or outside, and now all of a sudden I'm inside, right? Things that I used to be into, hobbies and sports, my game, I'm not into any of those things anymore. Isolation, all of those things are things that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those things that you just mentioned also can be similar for adults.
Oh no, they absolutely are. I told you the first thing that my friends noticed was that, hold on, she's not answering the phone like that.
Right.
She'll reply to a text, but if they're saying, I want to hear your voice,
exactly.
First, like, no, I don't. Listen, yes. I go through that.
I still go through that, sometimes.
Okay, the transparency is, and this is power in transparency. So I'm going to say that I'm a mental health advocate who struggles with her mental health.
Yes.
My anxiety that I experience is at an all-time high, and there are serious things I have to do daily to keep it together.
Oh my God.
Okay. Transparency. Yeah. That's the transparency really of it all. I go through that right now, and now my tribe knows me, so they will want to just at least make sure, like, okay, you're okay, like okay in the sense that you're okay. Right? This is just, like it still happens. It still happens.
Yeah.
But now I'm able to say now I'm able to say, like, my mind right now is like. So right now there's nothing happened but my meditation music. I've saged, I've read my scriptures, and this is the space that I'm in, and this is the space that I need, because I'm aware of what I need for my mental health.
I love this. I love this because I definitely can agree with you, and I definitely can share the same sentiments. And this is why I'm also very passionate about talking about mental health, and I'm still educating myself because it is still something that I go through as well. And on a daily basis, like you said, I have to constantly do my self-care and work on controlling my thoughts and controlling my mind, and not letting it go so deep and dark, and just knowing that it's okay to have a moment where you don't feel well. Just let that moment pass and you'll be okay again. So I thank you so much for mentioning that, and I want to have a deeper conversation in the near future about that, you and
Sure.
I.
Please.
Yes, but I know you wanted to mention the bill, so we have about like a minute, so you can talk about the
So really quickly, because of my experience as an educator, because of the work that we do in the community as far as youth, because of the statistics with the rate of suicide and everything that's happening with mental health in our youth, we have partnered with New York State Senator. He is from District 21, Senator Kevin Parker, who's also running for New York City Comptroller, actually 2021. And we have created Bill S5161. It is the Tactic Act. Tactic stands for Training and Comprehension of Trauma in Children. We need the support to get this bill passed. What this bill will do is make it mandatory for all New York City educators, aides, teachers assistants, to all be trained around trauma and mental health. It will also make mandatory for there to be support and workshops for parents, supporting their children around mental health, educating them around trauma. It will put a trauma-informed care council together so there's accountability at every level to ensure not just that the training is happening, but they're actually implementing it inside of the schools, and that this is something that is working. And so you can visit www.nysenate.gov, www.nysenate.gov to read the full bill and to support the bill. You can call or email your state senator and ask them to co-sponsor the bill. That is how you can support us, to help us make sure that our children who are coming into classrooms with much more than school bags and book supplies, that the educators see and attend to the whole child, the social, emotional well-being, and then the academics.
Wow. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Like, you have shared so much great information with us today. I wish we had more time. Thank you so much.
Okay. I froze.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. And we have so much to continue to talk about. Stephanie has done so many things. She has also been an ambassador at the United Nations. So there's so many great things I know that are coming for you. Thank you so much for all of the work that you do. And everyone, please check out Totality Wellness. We didn't get into the podcast, but everyone, please follow her podcast as well. It's super informative and it's also centered around mental health. So thank you again so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate you being on today. Thank you.
Thank you. We got to come back and do this again.
Yes, we do. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for watching The Fearless Show. Check out all of the past shows on my YouTube channel, The Fearless Show. Thank you.
Good night.